Ambassador Elena Volkov stepped off the diplomatic shuttle onto the crystalline platform of the Cretan Empire's throne world. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she wore the understated navy uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. At 63, she looked like what she was supposed to be, a career diplomat nearing retirement. King Zarthok watched from his obsidian throne as the human approached. His 4 eyes gleamed with contempt. Humans were weak, their lifespans laughably short, their bodies fragile. This old woman would sign whatever treaty he demanded, and Earth would become another vassal state. Ambassador Volkov, his translator device announced. "You come to discuss Earth's surrender terms?" Elena smiled politely, though her steel-blue eyes remained cold. "I come to discuss a mutual non-aggression pact, Your Majesty. Earth wishes to coexist peacefully with the Cretan Empire." Zarthok's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Coexist? We are the dominant power in 17 star systems. Earth has barely colonized its own moon. You will accept our terms or face annihilation." The other alien dignitaries in the throne room chittered and hissed their approval. Elena stood perfectly still, her hands clasped in front of her. Those who knew her well would have recognized the stance. It was the same one she'd held 40 years ago in the killing fields of Europa. "Your Majesty, I strongly advise against hostile action toward Earth." "Is that a threat?" Zarthok rose from his throne, his 3-meter frame towering over the human. "From this fragile creature?" Elena's expression didn't change. "It's a warning. One I've delivered to 14 other species over the past 4 decades. 12 accepted peace. 2 did not." She paused. "Those 2 civilizations no longer exist at a level capable of space travel." The throne room fell silent. Then Zarthok's laughter boomed through the chamber. "You expect me to believe you, a single old woman, destroyed 2 civilizations? I expect nothing, Your Majesty. I'm simply doing my job." Elena reached into her jacket, and every guard in the room tensed. She pulled out a data chip. "Earth's proposal. I suggest you read it carefully." Zarthok snatched the chip and crushed it in his massive claw. "I have a better proposal. You will remain here as my prisoner. Earth will surrender within 1 solar cycle, or I will execute you publicly and send your fleet as payment for your insolence." Elena's smile finally faded. "Your Majesty, you've just made a terrible mistake." The only mistake, Zarthok gestured to his guards, was Earth sending their grandmother to negotiate. As the guards surrounded her, Elena's eyes grew distant, remembering another name, another life. Before she was Ambassador Volkov, she had been something else entirely. Something the galaxy had learned to fear, then forgotten. They called her Baba Yaga. In a secure bunker beneath Earth's Geneva headquarters, General Marcus Webb watched the live feed from Elena's neural implant. Beside him, Admiral Kenji Tanaka closed his eyes and whispered, "God help them." "Sir?" A young intelligence officer looked confused. "Shouldn't we be preparing a rescue operation?" Webb laughed bitterly. "Son, Elena Volkov doesn't need rescuing. The Crethians do." He pulled up a file marked with the highest security clearance. 40 years ago, during the colony wars, Earth was losing. We were fighting 3 hostile species simultaneously. Our colonies were burning, millions were dying, and we were weeks away from total defeat. The general activated a hologram. It showed a young woman, barely 30, with the same steel-blue eyes as Elena. "Captain Elena Volkov, Shadow Corps. We gave her one mission, end the war." "What happened?" the officer asked. Admiral Tanaka answered, his voice hollow. "She ended it. In 6 months, all 3 enemy species sued for peace. We never learned exactly what she did. The records are sealed, even from us. But the enemy fleets called her Baba Yaga, the witch from old Earth legends. The one who lives in a house that walks on chicken legs, who devours those who threaten her. That's just a fairy tale, the officer protested. Yes, Webb agreed. And that's what makes it perfect. The enemy couldn't explain how entire military installations went dark. How their most secure bases were infiltrated. How their high command kept dying in ways that seemed impossible. So they created a myth around her. After the war, we kept the truth buried. Elena became a diplomat, the best way to prevent future conflicts. On the screen, Crethean guards were dragging Elena toward the dungeons. She wasn't resisting. The thing about Baba Yaga, Tanaka continued, is that in the old stories, she only killed those who threatened her or showed her disrespect. She could be an ally or a destroyer, depending on how you treated her. He looked at the young officer. Elena has spent 40 years trying to save species from themselves. She's given King Zarthok every chance to choose peace. And now, the officer asked. Webb pressed a button, activating emergency protocols. Now we evacuate every human from Crethean space. We warn every neutral species to pull their people out. And we wait. He looked at the screen where Elena was being thrown into a cell. We gave them 40 years of peace. They chose to wake the witch. The intelligence officer's hands trembled as he processed what he was hearing. How dangerous is she? Neither officer answered immediately. Finally, Tanaka spoke. During the colony wars, we kept statistics. Before Elena was deployed, our survival odds were calculated at 3%. After 6 months of her operations, 3 species surrendered unconditionally. He paused. In those 6 months, we lost 1 agent. They lost approximately 400,000 military personnel and 72 orbital stations. We still don't know how she did most of it. Sir, that's impossible for one person. Exactly, Webb interrupted. That's why they called her Baba Yaga. When the impossible happens, humans create myths. Elena sat in the Crethean detention cell, her back against the cold metal wall. The guards had confiscated her diplomatic credentials and her jacket, leaving her in a simple shirt and pants. They thought they'd disarmed her. They were wrong. Everything she needed was already inside the fortress. Zarthok had made his first mistake by imprisoning her instead of killing her immediately. His second mistake was assuming she was alone. His third, and fatal, mistake was not knowing Earth's true history. Through her neural implant, Elena accessed the quantum communications network. Webb, status report. The general's voice crackled in her ear. All human personnel have been evacuated from Crethean space. Neutral species have been warned. We're clear to proceed with your discretion. Negative, Elena replied softly. Maintain diplomatic protocols. This isn't a war yet. It's still a negotiation. A negotiation conducted in the only language King Zarthok seemed to understand. That night, the lights in Elena's cell block failed. The guards cursed, fumbling for backup illumination. When the lights returned 3 minutes later, Elena remained sitting in her cell, apparently meditating. But the guard stationed at the end of the corridor was gone. His weapon lay on the floor, plasma burns on the wall suggesting a struggle. No body was found. Captain Throck, head of the fortress security, reviewed the footage personally. The video showed nothing but static during those 3 minutes. Impossible, he muttered. Quantum-locked cameras don't malfunction. The next night, 2 guards disappeared. Their weapons were found arranged in a perfect circle in the commissary. Security footage showed only snow. By the 3rd night, fear had spread through the garrison. Soldiers refused to patrol alone. They whispered about the human prisoner who never seemed to sleep, whose eyes followed them with predatory patience. Throck finally confronted her. What are you? Elena looked up from her meditation. I'm a diplomat, Captain. I came here to prevent bloodshed. Your king chose a different path. You're killing my soldiers. No, Elena said calmly. I'm not. But someone is. Perhaps you should ask your king why Earth would send a fragile old woman to negotiate with a hostile empire. Perhaps you should wonder what kind of person volunteers for such assignments. Throck's scales rippled with unease. We will execute you tomorrow. Publicly. To show Earth that we fear nothing. Captain, Elena stood slowly, her movements precise and controlled. I've given you 3 days to release me and resume negotiations. That was courtesy. Professional respect between warriors. Her eyes hardened. Tomorrow, the courtesy ends. That night, the fortress's main power generator exploded. In the chaos, 17 more guards vanished. When order was restored, a message was found written in the fortress's security office, composed with plasma burns on the wall: send me home, or learn why they call me Baba Yaga. King Zarthok received the report with rage, but also, for the first time, uncertainty. King Zarthok summoned his war council in the deep hours of the morning. His 4 eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, and his mandibles clicked with barely contained fury. Around the table sat his most trusted advisors, General Cross, Admiral Vexna, and High Intelligence Officer Selt. Explain, Zarthok demanded, slamming his claw on the obsidian table, how one elderly human female has caused more damage to my fortress in 3 days than the rebellion of Proxima did in 3 years. Selt, a spider-like creature with 12 eyes, activated a holographic display. Your Majesty, we've been investigating Earth's military history. The information we found is disturbing. Disturbing? She's just one woman. That's what the Zagrosians said, Selt replied quietly. During the colony wars, Earth fought 3 species. The Zagrosians were the most powerful, twice Earth's military capacity. They should have won within months. The hologram showed battle statistics. Then Earth deployed something they called the Shadow Corps. Small teams. Highly specialized. And one operative in particular. The hologram shifted to show grainy footage of a younger Elena moving through an alien facility. The video quality was poor, but her efficiency was terrifying. She moved like water, anticipating every defense, neutralizing threats before they materialized. They called her Baba Yaga, Selt continued. After an old Earth legend. A witch who punishes those who show her disrespect. The Zagrosians lost 300 orbital stations in 4 months. Their high command was eliminated. Their entire intelligence network collapsed. They surrendered rather than face extinction. Propaganda, Zarthok insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Admiral Vexna spoke up. Your Majesty, I've reviewed our security footage, what little hasn't been corrupted. The pattern is consistent with military-grade infiltration techniques far beyond anything we've encountered. She's disabled our sensors, compromised our communications, and eliminated trained soldiers without leaving traces. This isn't an old woman. This is a weapon pretending to be a diplomat. General Cross added, we've also intercepted communications from neutral species. They're evacuating their personnel from our space. They know something we don't. Zarthok's claws scraped the table. His pride warred with his survival instinct. What do you suggest? That I release her? Show weakness to the entire galaxy? I suggest, Selt said carefully, that we consider why Earth sent her. They could have sent a young diplomat, someone impressive and strong. Instead, they sent someone who looks harmless. Someone whose presence is itself a message. What message? That Earth doesn't need to threaten. They have already won wars the galaxy has forgotten. Baba Yaga hasn't killed anyone in our fortress, yet. The missing guards were found this morning, alive, unconscious, with no memory of what happened. She's demonstrating capability while showing restraint. Selt's eyes glittered. She's still negotiating, Your Majesty. But in the only language you seemed willing to hear. The king sat in silence, processing this information. His empire had been built on strength, on the principle that might makes right. But what was strength against an enemy you couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even understand? What happens if I execute her tomorrow as planned? The War Council exchanged glances. Finally, Admiral Vexna answered. Then we find out if the legends are true, Your Majesty. And I respectfully suggest that is a test we cannot afford to fail. Zarthok stood, pacing the length of the chamber. Pride versus wisdom. Power versus survival. Bring her to me. Now. Alone. They brought Elena to Zarthok's private chamber, not the throne room. No guards, no witnesses. Just the king and the diplomat he tried to humiliate. She stood before him, hands still bound, her expression neutral. But Zarthok had learned to read the stillness in her posture. It was the calm of a predator conserving energy. You've made your point, he said finally. You're more than you appear. I'm exactly what I appear to be, Your Majesty. A diplomat. One with an unusual resume. My advisors tell me you fought in the colony wars. That you single-handedly brought 3 species to their knees. Elena shook her head. Not single-handedly. I had support. Intelligence. Resources. But yes, I did what was necessary to save my people. She met his gaze steadily. Just as I'm doing now. Is that what this is? Saving your people? Zarthok moved closer. Or is this revenge for my disrespect? If I wanted revenge, Your Majesty, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Elena's voice was flat, matter of fact. I've spent 40 years trying to prevent the kind of violence I once specialized in. I became a diplomat because I've seen what wars cost. Not just in lives, but in souls. She paused. I came here offering peace. You chose to imprison me and threaten my world. I responded proportionally. Proportionally? You've terrorized my fortress. No one has died. No permanent damage has been done. I could have started with your throne room and worked my way down. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. That's what I would have done 40 years ago. Now, I start with warnings. With demonstrations. With chances. Zarthok felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, genuine fear. What do you want? The same thing I wanted when I arrived. A non-aggression pact. Trade agreements. Mutual respect. Earth doesn't want to rule the galaxy, Your Majesty. We just want to live in it without constantly fighting for survival. Elena's expression softened slightly. You've built a powerful empire. But power without wisdom leads to collapse. I've seen it happen. I've caused it to happen. And if I refuse? Then I'll leave here, file my report, and recommend Earth prepare for war with the Creathian Empire. She let that sink in. And Your Majesty, Earth doesn't fight wars the way we used to. We've learned from our history. We don't seek conquest. But we've also learned that sometimes, to preserve peace, you must demonstrate the capacity for overwhelming violence. Zarthok clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You would destroy my empire? No. I would make you wish I had. Elena's voice was soft but absolute. I would dismantle your military infrastructure so precisely that you'd never threaten anyone again, but I'd leave your civilization intact. Your people would survive. Your culture would survive. But your capacity for aggression would end. She tilted her head. Or you could sign a treaty, trade with Earth, and build something better than an empire built on fear. The king was silent for a long moment. Finally, he removed her restraints himself. Tell me, Ambassador. Did they really call you Baba Yaga? They did. Because they needed an explanation for things they couldn't understand. I let them keep their myths. Fear of the unknown is more powerful than fear of the known. The treaty signing took place 3 days later. This time, the throne room was filled with representatives from a dozen neutral species, all watching with intense interest. News had spread through diplomatic channels. Earth's harmless ambassador had somehow convinced the Crethean Empire to negotiate after being imprisoned. King Zarthok stood beside Elena at the signing table, his demeanor markedly different from their first meeting. He was still imposing, still regal, but the contempt was gone, replaced by something like respect. Let the record show, he announced to the assembled dignitaries, that the Crethean Empire and Earth hereby enter into a mutual non-aggression pact. We recognize Earth's sovereignty and welcome them as equals in the galactic community. Elena signed the document with steady hands, then Zarthok added his mark. The room erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers and relief. Several ambassadors looked genuinely shocked. War between Earth and the Cretheans had seemed inevitable. As the ceremony concluded, a young Crethean officer approached Elena. "Ambassador, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "The rumors, about what happened in the fortress. About who you really are. Are they true?" Elena smiled gently. "I'm a diplomat representing Earth. Everything else is just stories people tell to make sense of things they don't understand." But the officer noticed she hadn't actually denied anything. Later, during the reception, Admiral Vexna found Elena at the refreshment station. "You spared us," the Admiral said quietly. "Why?" "My analysis suggested you could have crippled our military command in less than a week." "Because I'm tired of war, Admiral." Elena gazed out at the stars through the massive viewports. "I've spent 4 decades trying to be something other than what I was trained to be. Every species I meet, I hope they'll choose peace. Most do, eventually. And those who don't?" Elena's expression hardened briefly. "Then I remind them why humanity survived long enough to reach the stars. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest or the fastest. But we're adaptable, we're persistent, and we're very, very good at learning from our mistakes." She turned to face the Admiral. "The colony wars taught us that being good at killing isn't something to be proud of, it's something to be used sparingly, as a last resort." Vexna's scales rippled with understanding. "You are Baba Yaga." "I was. Now I'm just Elena Volkov, doing my best to make sure no one needs to meet her again." Across the room, King Zarthok watched the exchange. General Cross approached him. "Your Majesty, do you think we made the right choice?" "We made the only choice, General. We encountered something our empire's strength couldn't defeat, someone who had already mastered violence so completely that they chose to pursue peace instead." He paused. "That's a far more dangerous opponent than any mere warrior." The general nodded slowly. "What do we tell the other species?" "About what happened?" Zarthok's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "The truth. That we negotiated with Earth and found them to be worthy partners. Let them draw their own conclusions." 6 months after the treaty signing, General Webb sat in his office reviewing reports. Elena was scheduled to return to Earth in a week after successfully negotiating secondary agreements with 3 more species in the sector. The Crethean incident had, ironically, enhanced her reputation. Now species actually sought her out as a mediator. The young intelligence officer from before knocked and entered. "Sir, we're picking up some interesting chatter on the diplomatic networks." Webb raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Species across the sector are sharing a story. About Earth's secret weapon. They're calling her Baba Yaga again." The officer pulled up several translated communiques. "They say she brought the Crethean Empire to its knees without firing a shot. That she can walk through walls, disappear into shadows, and strike without warning." Webb chuckled. "And what does Elena say about it?" "She says, and I quote, 'Let them tell their stories. Fear prevents more wars than weapons ever will.'" Smart woman. Webb leaned back in his chair. Do you understand now? What she really is? The officer considered this. She's a deterrent. Living proof that Earth can fight if necessary, but that we prefer not to. Close. She's a reminder. A reminder that humanity earned its place in the galaxy not through conquest, but through survival. We were nearly wiped out during the colony wars. But we're still here because we produced people like Elena, people who could do the impossible when required. Webb pulled up Elena's service record, though most of it remained classified even to him. The legend of Baba Yaga serves Earth better than 1,000 warships. It makes species think twice before threatening us. Sir, do you know what she actually did during the colony wars? The classified operations? Webb shook his head. No. And I never want to. Some secrets are better left buried. What matters is that she did what needed to be done, then spent the rest of her life trying to ensure no one would ever need to do it again. On the diplomatic station orbiting Crethean Prime, Elena sat in her quarters composing her final report. Through her window, she could see Crethean ships moving in peaceful patterns, trading with vessels from a dozen species. Her neural implant chimed. A message from Admiral Tanaka, you did it again. Another war prevented. When are you going to retire and write those memoirs? Elena smiled and typed back, never. Some stories should remain legends. Reality is less frightening than imagination, and right now, the galaxy's imagination is working in our favor. She thought about the Zagrosians, who still whispered her name in their military academies as a cautionary tale. About the Threx Confederation, who'd sued for peace after just 2 weeks of her operations. About King Zarthok, who now understood that Earth's strength lay not in its weapons but in its restraint. The legend said Baba Yaga was immortal, that she could never die. In a way, that was true. As long as species remembered the stories, as long as they feared what might happen if they pushed humanity too far, Elena Volkov could continue being just a diplomat. But she always carried her tools. Just in case. Because the thing about fairy tales, she'd learned long ago, was that they served a purpose. They taught lessons. They warned of consequences. They reminded people that appearances could be deceiving, that the old woman in the forest might be something far more dangerous than she seemed. Earth had given the galaxy a gift, 40 years of Elena Volkov the diplomat instead of Captain Volkov the weapon. Most species were wise enough to appreciate that gift. And those who weren't? They learned why you should never disrespect Baba Yaga. Elena closed her report and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, another crisis was brewing. Another species would need a reminder about peace. Another king would need to learn humility. And she would be ready. Not because she wanted to be, but because humanity needed its legends to be real, its myths to have teeth, its diplomats to carry shadows. The witch in the diplomatic uniform smiled slightly and began preparing for her next assignment. After all, someone had to keep the galaxy's fairy tales alive.